Before we get started, we'll give people just a few extra minutes to get in, but I can answer some of the questions that were submitted during our registration. The first question was, what's the difference between self-hosted and hosted Grist? You'll actually hear me refer to this later on in the webinar. Self-hosted Grist means that it's hosted on your own servers, whereas hosted Grist is hosting the servers. Basically, you access at getgrist.com. I hate to say most people are using our hosted version. That's maybe not true these days. But if you go to getgrist.com and you can log in from this way, or docs.getgrist.com, that means you're using our hosted version. But again, you can use the self-hosted version, which just means you're running on your own servers. There's a bunch of options when it comes to self-hosted Grist. So if that is something you're interested in, feel free to reach out to us, and we can give you more details on what self-hosted entails, what kind of flavors there are, a lot of different options. The next question was, can we record a timestamp when a toggle is last set? And yes, you can. As you see, I've got this toggle column. If I click this plus icon, it opens our add column menu, and there's actually a shortcut to add this timestamp. So you hover over timestamp, and in this case, we want to apply on record changes. Apply to new records would just give you a timestamp when the record is created. We want to know when that toggle column changes, so I'm going to apply on record changes. Let me zoom in a bit. In the creator panel over here on the right-hand side, you see that the trigger formula is set to now, and then it applies on changes to any field. If you only care about one specific column, just update that. We're going to select toggle. So now if I update a toggle column, it's going to record the time, date and time that I made that change. So if I turn this one off, it will also record that update. Now, if you only want to know when the toggle is true, you can modify the formula for that as well. So if the toggle's true, return now. And then otherwise, I'll say return value, which just means return the current value in the cell. So if I turn this one off, it should stay at 10:03. Okay, looks good. Does not change. But if I toggle it to true, now it records the updated time. So two different ways to do it. If you want it to update regardless of what the toggle is changing to, you don't need all this extra stuff. You just need to do now. But if you do only want it when the toggle is true, you would just modify the formula accordingly. But again, to get that last updated it was just click this plus icon, and then you go to timestamp, and then you can apply on record changes. So that's a simple way to do it. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our October webinar. Last month, we learned all about creating guided tours in Grist using document tours and tutorials. If you weren't able to attend, you can find a recording of that webinar along with all of our previous webinars on our YouTube channel under the Build with Grist webinar playlist. A recording of this webinar will be available there as well sometime next week. So in today's webinar, you'll get to see how Grist uses Grist. Many of us here at Grist use Grist for work, and then also for personal use. So we're going to show off some documents, talk through some of the key features that they utilize. So this document here is from a member of our dev team, Jordi. Jordi shared his document for tracking his NES game collection. It's a really clean, simple document with a great use of summary tables and charts. So the majority of his data is in a single table. It's this one in the upper left, the NES shopping list. Here he tracks details for games he either owns or wants to purchase. He does include a URL, so if the game is on his wish list, he can easily go back and purchase it when he's ready. Jordi does host his own Grist instance, so he's using that self-hosted Grist. And because of this, he's able to use the request function to do a few special things within his document. The request function is not available with hosted Grist for security reasons. But again, he's self-hosting, so he's opted to use it in his instance. So for example, he has this URL still valid column that checks if the URL is valid. So his Kickstarter URLs are always valid. They just archive them. So if Kickstarter's in the URL, it just returns true. We can skip those. But for any other URLs, it uses the request function and checks the status code of that URL. And then he knows if the URL is valid or not. So if we scroll down to the bottom here, there is actually one that shows that the URL is not valid. And if I click on it, we do see that it's no longer a valid URL. So a cool little feature within his document here. Jordi's located in Canada, but most of the prices for games are listed in either US dollar or euro. So he's added some bits in here to convert the currencies to Canadian dollar. He has the exchange rates listed in a separate table. Here we're just going to the exchange rate. So he has the currency code and he has the rate. Well, the rate is actually a formula column too. So this is another place where he utilizes the request function. So this formula in the rate column checks the Bank of Canada website for the current exchange rate for the currency code that's listed. So this updates automatically for him. It's really a cool feature. But again, for security reasons, request is not available in the hosted version of Grist. Again, Jordi's able to use this because he's enabled it in his self-hosted instance. So jumping back over to his NES shopping list, his price in Canadian dollars is also a formula column. And it's using a lookup one formula that's looking up that exchange rate from the exchange rate table. And then it just converts this price from whatever currency is listed to Canadian dollars. Purchase status allows him to track if the game is purchased as a hard copy, if he owns it digitally, waiting for delivery. For that one, he buys a lot of games on Kickstarter. When you buy something on Kickstarter, it takes forever to actually receive the product. And so this lets him know what's kind of still out there that he's waiting for. And then he can also add it to his wish list. So he's got a wish listed status as well. Play status allows him to track progress with the game. Has he started it? Has he finished it? It's important to him to not have a huge backlog of games waiting to be played. And so he uses this to track the status. Now across the bottom, he has summaries to easily keep track of how many games he owns, total spent, as well as how many games are at each play status. Again, he doesn't want a huge backlog of games. He wants to know that he's finishing the majority of the games he's purchasing. But my favorite part of this document is actually his custom widget, which is over here on the right-hand side. This uses a Plotly sunburst chart to show purchase status in the inner ring and then the play status in the outer ring, broken down by purchase status. So for example, for his purchased games, he has finished the majority of the games he's purchased. He's started a few, And then there's actually one that he still has not started yet. So it gives him a quick overview of what he's waiting on, which ones he has digitally, of the digital ones, has he finished, has he started? A lot of cool stuff. Now this custom widget is built using the custom widget builder custom widget, a mouthful. The code exists directly in the widget. So let me show that to you. So we've got the HTML here, and then the JavaScript here. He initially tried using the advanced charts custom widget, which also uses Plotly, but it did not have the particular chart he wanted, the starburst. And so he just built it here. Now, this is a great example of how much you can do in Grist with honestly a very simple data set. Jordi has 36 games listed in this table with price, purchase status, and play status. And he's able to get all of these great summaries using Grist. So you don't need a ton of data to get value out of Grist. Nick is going to share a document. He's part of our marketing team, and so he's going to show a document that he uses here at Grist.
Hello, everyone. First time presenter, long time webinar watcher. Glad to be here. I just want to say two things about using Grist at Grist is that I was a huge Google Docs user before I joined Grist, and I literally have not used Google Docs for anything meaningful since. So that's one thing. The second thing, though, is that I've made a lot of really bad Grist documents, like really ugly ones that I started and they got out of hand and I didn't finish them. So I don't want to say like that that just because I'm using Grist for everything means that I've figured out data and there are no more things to work on. And the one I have to share today is a little bit of a cautionary tale. Let me just share the screen so everyone can see. Okay. So hopefully you can see that. Looks like that's good. Okay. So a little bit of background. I was working on some Google Ads campaigns, and if anyone in the webinar knows Google Ads, they might be shaking their head at several points during this little overview. But basically, when you're starting a Google Ads campaign, you need a bunch of keywords that you want to target for that campaign. And I was working on some of these campaigns, and I noticed kind of there was at least the way we were doing them previously was there was kind of a programmatic way to generate these keywords, but we were kind of doing it manually. So I thought, well, why can't I use Grist to kind of help generate keywords by covering certain keywords and certain modifiers and have it just automatically do everything. So I kind of had an idea for that and I built it out in Grist and this is what it looks like. And technically it does work. Like it actually generates the keywords that I want and it lets me export it in a way that's importable into Google Ads. But I kind of learned the hard way that this is really not the best strategy for keyword building, or at least not anymore, or at least not for the kind of stuff that we're doing. So the document itself, I think, works and is neat, though very cramped, but the strategic element I was kind of wrong with. But anyways, I want to talk about Grist and I want to talk about Google Ads. So let me just go over this very cramped dashboard that if you've created some dashboards, you learn to love your own dashboard, but I'm sure people looking at this is hurting their eyes. Fortunately, if I zoom in anymore, things will just start breaking because there's too many boxes. Anyways, so I'll try to go over these boxes in a somewhat logical way. You can see here, this is kind of the output in two different forms. So these are all the generated keywords and then a count. You can see there's 11. This is kind of the main hierarchy of the top level campaigns, and then Google Ads breaks them out into ad groups. So different ad groups can target different keywords, use different ads, et cetera, et cetera. I have another box here just with additional counters, but it covers the entire campaign, not just a specific ad group. I have two small ones here. So this is a phrase blacklist. So when you're generating keywords programmatically, you can get into some trouble where you have weird combinations. And this just allows you to enter a phrase and then it will kill all the keywords with that phrase. And you'll see why that's useful in a bit. There's also this helper, which is like miscellaneous keywords. So one-offs that don't kind of fit the schema of the generator, you plop them in here. And that is helpful as well. And then the meat of it is this part at the bottom. So, there's also this action button that copies the text in the format that Google's importer uses, and you paste that in from there. So what this does is it kind of it's a very simple kind of generator that has two prefixes, the root and then the suffixes. So it takes these and with very simple rules, mashes them all together to generate all possible variations of those terms based on the root. So you can see here, and you can also have blank. So it can, like an empty value is applicable for non-root columns. So for example, blank here and free here means that we want every variation of blank. So open source CRM software, and then free open source CRM software, although free open source is not good. So we can add that to the blacklist, which I'll do when I build my own. So I'm just going to jump in and start building one from scratch. So we'll go in business intelligence. This is not really meaningful. I think it was at one point. So this is the first prefix. So we're going to do the same thing we did before, be able to be blank and be able to be free. Another prefix, open source. It's really important. The Grist is open source. We can also do, what else do I have here? Online. And then since it's a legal campaign, we can do legal. And you can see this pinned column is just, if you have a lot, I wanted to have some ones that were pinned up there so you could easily toggle them on and off. And then the root. So this is kind of the big one to keep in mind. So we'll do spreadsheet. We'll just start with one root because that's when it starts really spreading out. So the root is spreadsheet, and then suffixes, for example, a spreadsheet alternative. And then the second suffix is like for law firms. Okay, so now that we have all of these, you can see that it generated some keywords. We have 6 keywords that match all of these potential combinations. Online spreadsheet alternative for law firms, open source spreadsheet alternative for law firms, and so on. So that's great. If we just want to add a one-off, like legal app builder, we plop that in there, and now we have 7. Okay, good. The fun part is that because it does all the possible combinations, you can really go crazy. And so if we did, it's not just a spreadsheet, it's a CRM. It's also a database because Grist is a spreadsheet and a database. And it's also an alternative. It's also a app builder. Again, we're getting a little silly here, but because it's going to be like a spreadsheet app builder. And then for law firms, for legal teams, for paralegal. And then we can also have a blank here. So all of these combinations, but without that suffix, if we wanted to cover that as well. And again, please don't take this advice for Google Ads keyword building because I don't think it's a good way to do it. But it's a fun way to see a number go up, as you can see here. So you can see we have 97 now. And we can also do a blacklist thing. So for example, oh, see that's empty, so now it's blacklisting everything. But we don't want free and open source, so we're going to add this phrase to the blacklist. We went from 97 to 81 because every permutation, including that phrase, just got killed. and is no longer in there. So now we can see it. There's a couple different ways. This is how Google takes it in with the commas. And yeah, that's basically it. It was really fun to play with, to get a lot of keywords, but didn't end up kind of using it in production that much because that strategy was a bit unwieldy and I don't think optimal. But again, I'm not an ads expert. Don't look at my job title or my responsibilities. And there's one more thing where you also generate kind of the ad copy for Google Ads. And I just wanted to make a quick dashboard to help me with that. So basically you can see the campaign, you can see the ad groups, and then there's like recommended numbers of headlines, recommended numbers of descriptions, and then maximum character counts for all of these. So this just allowed me to have a dashboard where I could do this all in one spot. You can obviously do this in Google Ads as tools and whatnot. I found this a bit easier because it also tied into all of the campaigns. You can see the references that I'm using, made it all tied together, which I thought was nice. And then it also allows me to format it and export it in a way that could be imported. So it made the kind of data ingestion aspect easy as well. So this dashboard just shows you all the generated columns in the proper ones that the importer uses, so that it takes all this stuff, mashes it together, formats it properly, so I don't have to do any crazy copying and pasting to actually get it into Google Ads. So in theory, for an entire campaign, I could write all the ads here. You can see that like it does get to be a lot, and then go here, export it, and import it without having to fiddle with Google's ads dashboard, which is not great. That's probably unfair. It's a bit unwieldy sometimes. So yeah, apologies if I went a little bit fast. I get excited talking about Grist dashboards. But did anyone have any questions? I wasn't looking at the chat at all. Can you show the formula code used to generate the list of keywords? Oh, so there's a lot of hidden columns here. But it's not that complicated. This is the formula here, and I think it just goes through, gets all of the prefixes, the root, the suffixes, and then mashes them together in a for loop. And then it like removes the blacklist as well, adds the miscellaneous keywords. And yeah, I'm sure it could be optimized, but it's not too crazy. Thanks everyone for joining. And back to you, Natalie.
Thank you to Nick. So our next one is from another member of our dev team. This is from Callum. Callum also works for Savage Game Design, a game studio whose mission is to create historically accurate Vietnam War era video games. So the document that we are looking at is what they use for planning skills, abilities, and equipment unlocks within the role-playing game SOG Prairie Fire. So whenever you level up, you gain points, and then these points can be used to purchase various skills. And so what we're looking at right now is the table of skills. Tree is the skill tree that a particular skill belongs to. So for example, combat skills are part of a different skills tree than medic skills. So if you've played role-playing games, you'll understand that skills tree. Name, just the name of the skill. Type, is it a weapon, special skill, a gear unlock, passive, active? Basically, it applies specific to how they are applied in the game. Description, that's actually what appears in the game. It's the user-facing description of the skill. Layout priority is how a skill is rendered horizontally in the custom widget, which we're going to see shortly. So the skills tree lists the skills going from lowest to highest, and then layout priority just shows basically which column each skill goes in. Tier assigns the order in which skills can be acquired. So in order to purchase a tier 2 skill, you must have some number of tier 1 skills. Points is how much it costs to unlock that skill in game. This duration and cooldown column, these are specific to active skills. So duration is how long that skill lasts when in use, and then cooldown is how long until you can use that skill again. And then status is for task tracking. So if the skill has been accepted, they've had a meeting, they're like, yes, we want to put this in the game. It moves to accepted. They have in-game, so it's in the game, they're happy with it, but they also have in-game needs work, meaning it's in the game, something about it they're not a fan of, they need to make some adjustments. They also have undecided, so if it's a skill that they haven't made a decision on, they can just plug it in here, and now it's a task for when they have a meeting they can discuss. Now, the cool thing with this table are these two columns at the end. So string table and config template generate code for the game. So they copy this text into the game files, and then it just loads what they want into the game, which is really cool. So they can just set everything up in Grist and organize it, and then they have all the code ready to go. And they use this a couple different places. So you'll get to see some more of this. At the top of the page, they have some collapsed widgets. Skills by tree is used for balancing the skills trees. So you'll see quite a few have very similar numbers across the board, and that's intentional. They want these to be balanced. So whether you're a medic or a team leader, the way you move through a skills tree is very similar. They also make sure that the points are very balanced as well. So you're not spending a bunch of points as a team leader, whereas medic, it doesn't cost as much to go through the skills tree. So that's how they use that one. They have a second summary table here that just shows it more based on the type of skill, and so they can balance across types as well. The really cool part of this is their custom widget, and that is the skills tree. Let me zoom out a bit so you can see that. So this is the combat tree. So at the bottom are your tier 0 skills. And this is built off that table that we just looked at. So these are all the skills that you can get right away. And then as you get more points, you can buy more skills and you can work your way up the skills tree. They have a drop down at the top so you can change the tree. So now we can see what it looks like as a medic. How do they progress throughout the game? And so they can make sure that all of their skills make sense. The trees are balanced to make for good gameplay. So equipment progression here is used to organize what gear is unlocked for each role at each level. So you get weapons with attachments and magazines, backpacks, and other equipment. Scroll across and we can see the different fields available. They use reference columns with drop-down conditions to ensure that only attachments and magazines that are compatible with that weapon are unlocked at that time. So it's not really useful to have attachments or magazines available for a weapon that's unavailable. And that's what these other tables under here are just linking different attachments to specific weapons, basically organizing what goes with what. So when they build the progression, it makes sense. So by default, that's the level 0 here that we have selected at the top. Quite a bit of gear is unlocked. We can see a lot of weapons, attachments and magazines. And then over here, we've got equipment and backpacks that are all unlocked by default in the game. And then as you go up, when you achieve, let's say, level 1 Grenadier, you'll unlock another weapon, some corresponding magazines. And so they can organize that all here in this Grist document. This summary just summarizes everything from that page into a single view. So you can quickly see everything unlocked at each level. It is sorted by name and then level, so they can easily see the progression. So this is everything unlocked by default. And then we move into Grenadier level 1 and up, and you can see what's unlocked at level 1. Here's level 13, everything unlocked. And so they can see everything at, honestly, a glance. It's very quick. And then again, the cool thing with this is that they have this config table that runs all of these formulas. So it creates this code that they can just copy paste into the files for the game. And so it just loads up, which is crazy to me that it's that simple. Here's the full config that they would copy and paste in. Of information right there, and they just copy paste it and it's all set. It's just a lot easier to see it organized here and to think through what should be available at what level rather than trying to do it all in the game and then realizing something's off. So they can organize it here, copy paste the code into the game, and it's good to go. If you're interested in seeing another use case from Savage Game Design, we did share a case study on how Savage works with Special Forces veterans to collect primary source material, create interactive storylines based on real battles and missions. I will share a link to that case study. It's really interesting. And again, this is from Callum, who is on our dev team. This is his other job, is to create these games. We'll jump over to our next example. So this is another document from our marketing team. So this is used to track Reddit posts that are potentially related to Grist. The first column here is keyword. This shows the exact keyword search they used that led to finding the Reddit post. Topic, that's just the name of the topic for the Reddit post. They do track if it's been closed or archived. They also track if they've commented on the post. They track which subreddit the post was shared in. You'll notice that our Excel has colors added. There's no actual reason behind this other than Excel's logo is green. They just never got around to adding colors to the other choices because there are a lot of other choices. So it would be hard to keep up with that. I often do the same thing in my documents. I start color coding. I'm going to make it all pretty, and then it's too much to keep up with. They track the URL, so it's easy to click back and navigate back to the post. They also track which one of them found or commented on the post. KW cluster categorizes the keyword, so it's easier to filter, say for all posts related to templates or for AI, for example. So these first three are listed as AI. And if we go back to the keyword, it's pretty obvious they're all AI. So it just helps them group them a little bit better. Source tracks how they found the post. So was it a Google search, conversation with ChatGPT, or did it just show up in their Reddit feed? And then last updated at tracks the last time anyone made an update to one of the fields for this record. They haven't gotten any value out of this column yet, but they chose to include it because one, it's just a cool feature in Grist, and two, it's easy to include and have set up so that, if you need it in the future, it's already there tracking the last updated time. I actually use this feature a lot in documents. For example, I have a document that contains an inventory for my Lego collection, and I can filter the last updated at column to see which records haven't been touched in over a year. and then check the value on those sets to see if they've changed and update my insured value. So that's just another place where this would be super useful. But you can easily add a created at or a last updated at column from this add column menu. You just click the plus icon at the far right of a table, and there's these shortcuts at the bottom. You hover over timestamp, you can apply to new records, which creates a timestamp of when the record was created. And then we have apply on record changes, which creates a last updated at column, exactly like you see here. And so it's very quick, easy to create this column and just let it collect information. So if you're unsure if you might need this in the future, just go ahead and add it, and then it's there when you need it. Last at the top of the page, they have a card widget with some fields they just don't use as often. So the card widget is linked to the table. So when you select a Reddit post, the card updates to show more data for the selected record. And by moving these less needed fields into the collapsed card, it just keeps the view a little bit more tidy. So it's there when they need them, but in general, they don't use them, so they can keep them off their view. The feature that they thought y'all would be most interested in seeing in this document is actually that duplicate entries are restricted. So let's say I stumble upon one of these posts again, and I'm not realizing that it's already in this document. I'm just going to copy this URL. So let's say I add a duplicated URL. I get this pop up in the bottom corner that's restricting the creation of that record because it already exists. So to make this work, they have a hidden column called duplicate. I'm just clicking that plus icon for the add column menu, and then under hidden columns, duplicate. This column checks to see if another record exists with the same URL. If so, it returns true. This is another column that can be easily added to your document from the add column menu. You click that plus icon under shortcuts, detect duplicates in, and then select which column you want to detect duplicates in. We select URL. It's showing blank right now because it's defaulting to checkbox. So in the column tab of the creator panel, you can change the cell format from checkbox to text box, and now it's showing true or false. That's why it's showing blank, but it is returning the same value. So once you have this column, you would just add an access rule condition restricting record creation when this column returns true. So we're going to navigate over to access rules from the left-hand tools menu. Zoom in a bit so you can see that better. And so we have table rules added for the data table, which is where they keep the Reddit data. And the condition is just new rec.duplicate equals true, meaning when the value in the duplicate column is true for new records, restrict creation. And then they've added a memo here. So when someone does that, they know why they're being restricted. If you just keep trying to paste it and you're just getting an error, it would be confusing. So having those memos is really handy. Now we do have a similar example setting up this access rules condition in our help center. I'll share a link to that now. So if it's something you're interested in setting up in your own document, you can follow along with that. It does it slightly differently. It does it based on the number of records rather than a true or false, but essentially works the same way. Now, this is another great example where it's really a simple data table. Not a ton of information, but you can do so much with it. If they wanted to summarize their data, they could easily do that. Let's say you wanted a chart to see a breakdown of keyword clusters. We could add a chart summarizing keyword cluster. Let's update it. And now you can see which keyword clusters they see the most posts for. So templates are pretty popular, AI, but it's really easy to summarize the data once you have a data table. It's just get some data in the Grist and you can do a lot with it. Moving on to our next one. This one Dimitri submitted. This is what we use internally to keep track of invoices for contractors. So before we jump into this dashboard that we see on our page right now, we're going to look at the data tables that actually make up this document. There are 4. To start, we have a people table. This just shows information for our contractors. Overall, pretty straightforward. There are a couple conditional formatting rules worth pointing out here. So first, if missing is true, then the entire row is red. I'll open the creator panel so we can see these in action. So these are the different conditional formatting that are applied. So if missing is true, the row is red. Now missing is true when an invoice is missing, meaning they haven't been paid in the last month. So we can see that Sherlock Holmes and Hercule Poirot are missing an invoice. So these records are red. It just makes it stand out so you quickly know if you're behind on invoicing someone. You might also notice that missing is true for Arsène Lupin, but this record is gray rather than red and also crossed out. And that's because we have another conditional formatting rule that applies, this gray strike through formatting, when inactive is marked as true. So they're obviously not getting an invoice because they're an inactive contractor at this point. We have an access table. This is used specifically for access rules, so contractors can access their invoices in this document without seeing anyone else's invoices. And we'll take a look at those access rules at the end. Rates list the rates for each contractor and the start date for each rate. There is a formula column here, normally hidden from view here, that checks which rate is the current rate. Once it checks that, conditional formatting is applied to rows that are no longer current, graying them out and striking them through. So here we see is current is false. And so we see that it's grayed out, has the strike through because it no longer applies. This is the current rate for Sherlock Holmes. All invoices is a table of invoices. Data is not entered here. It's just showing what that underlying data table looks like with all of the invoice data. We actually entered data on that dashboard, the invoices page. So here you would enter invoice data for contractors. You would select a contractor from the list. The invoices table updates to show all invoices for that contractor. And you can select an invoice and the card below updates to show specific data for that invoice. So here in the table on the upper left, we see that both Hercule and Sherlock are both red. And if you recall from the people table, it's because they're missing an invoice. They haven't been invoiced in over a month. And so you just come in, insert a row for the new invoice. Let's see, we'll add some data here for their September invoice. The invoice. So now we have the data entered. The total amount 400 is bold and red, and that's because it's not matching the monthly amount. And that's because Hercule was on vacation this month. So we can just update the monthly amount this time to 400. So that corrects the total amount. And then I can just add a note saying, oh, it's different because he was on vacation. Now that I've added that information, he's no longer red. We're caught up with his invoices, good to go for a few more days. And in a week, it'll probably turn red again because it's been a month. In the bottom left-hand corner, we have a summary table that shows the total amount paid out to contractors for each month. That's just for internal accounting. And then, as I mentioned briefly before, there are access rules set up in this document. So contractors can access this document, but only see their own invoice information. So I'm going to jump over to access rules. I won't go through these. We do have some good access rules webinars that talk through how to set these up. But we have a user attribute that looks at that access table. I can jump back to that so we can see what it looks like. It just matches the logged in user's email to this column. And then we know it belongs to this person. And then we can restrict or grant access based on the person. And so that's what these access rules are doing. I can use the view as feature to view as Sherlock. And zoom out a bit. Sherlock only sees himself in the people table and then can see all of his invoices in the invoice table with the information about number of days worked, what he was paid, any extra amount. He can also download his invoices. They're all here. And he can see his cumulative pay. Now this document does use dummy data, so I can share a link to a copy of it with you all. There you go. So if you wanted to explore that more, you can. It has so many great features in it, and you've got widget linking, tons of different column types, tons of different conditional formattings, and of course access rules, which can be really handy when you have sensitive data like this, like invoices, but you still want to share it with whoever you're invoicing. You can use access rules to limit what they can see. Most of what I do in Grist becomes templates since it's just part of my job. So explore the template gallery and you can see so many different ways that Grist is used. Internally, one of the ways that Grist is used is for our task tracking. Like our weekly check-ins are all done in this crazy document, but there is a template based on that, the task management template. So that's a good example of how Grist is used internally. And then, of course, I have tons of templates of how I use it outside of Grist in my personal life. For example, we have the travel planning template that looks a lot like this. This is my personal travel planning document. I plan all of my trips in Grist. For example, like if I'm shopping for a flight, I actually have a different page that I use, but I'll put the flights that I'm most interested in into this little table so I can compare them and see what works with our schedule, with our budget. And then I pick my favorites so that I know that those are the ones to book. I created a little activity tag that I can copy paste into my itinerary so that it pops up in my itinerary as well. One of the other things that I do with my travel planning document is plug in the activities I'm interested in, but I don't plan how I'm going to do them until I see them in a map. So for example, we did a road trip through Arkansas. And so I could see in the map generally where the locations were. And so I could just make a big circle to plan out our road trip. Or we went to Hawaii for our honeymoon. And so I found what activities were near each other so we could group those together on the same day and plan things that way. So that's one of the ways I use Grist. It's also handy for like activities or lodging when you have confirmations. So I upload all my documents into here. So when I'm on the go and I have my phone, I can just open my Grist document, find those downloads or the attachments, and get any information I need about that activity. Again, most of my use cases are in our template gallery, so I would recommend checking that out. You can get to it from your homepage. Just click templates under Grist resources, and you can see tons of different templates to help give you an idea of how someone uses Grist. Because most of the time these come from someone's use case, whether it be one of us at Grist, either using it for work purposes or personal reasons, or someone's contacted us and had a good use case that we ended up creating a template for. So it's a great way to see how others are using Grist. Thank you guys so much for joining. I know it's a little bit of a different webinar this time, but next month, please join us. We are going to learn about our AI assistant again. I know we did a webinar back in May called Chat with Your Doc, but we're going to do build your doc with AI. So the AI assistant has grown so much since May, so we're going to do a new webinar on it, show you how to build a document from scratch. So definitely join us for that. Thank you guys. We'll see you next month.